All right. Okay, good morning and happy Wednesday again to all of you who are out there watching. We are having a double header on Eastern Europe today. We started off with a discussion about Linz, Austria, which actually I guess is considered Western Europe, but we're talking about the Danube area, again with Reed Cohen. Good morning again, Reed.
Good morning, everybody.
So we have a special guest today to show us another city that you might not have seen or heard much about. I mean, Linz, I know you probably haven't heard about. Bratislava, I think you've heard about, but maybe you haven't seen. So joining us live from Bratislava is Martin Sloboda. Good morning.
Hi, everyone.
So what we're going to do today is Reed and I are just going to chat a little bit with Martin to start with, and then we're going to actually have a slideshow that Martin has put together so you can actually see a little bit about what we're talking about. So Reed, you and I were discussing last week about how Bratislava is one of those places that not a lot of people know about, or they miss, like they think it's Budapest or something, but it's actually kind of a hidden gem, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things that makes the cruise special. Everybody has high expectations for when we take them to Salzburg and when we show up in Vienna and Budapest. Those are the big hitters. You know, we finish in Prague. So people come into Bratislava without much in the way of expectations, and it's absolutely charming. It's just the most charming little capital city. It is the capital, right, of Slovakia?
It is the largest city and the capital.
For a moment there, I thought I was misspeaking, but and then a big part of that is Martin. Martin is kind of has created tourism in Bratislava in the last 20 years, and he knows everything. He knows everybody, and his expertise and his savvy with the group makes for a really, really special day on the cruise. So I'm really excited that Martin's willing to come on board with us today and share some of that knowledge and some images today. It really is one of those things that ends up being a highlight of the cruise for those people who go.
Very cool. All right. So I'm just curious then, Martin, how long have you been guiding for? Like, how did you get into the tour guiding industry?
I stopped counting. I think I did the first course when I was like 18. So as soon as I was at the university, this was a way for me to make extra money. And as soon as I graduated, I established my company. So as my wife put it, what do you know about life? You never worked. Because I was never employed. I had my own business from the very beginning.
Wow, that's really great. You started off, I mean, Reed and I are doing that, but it took us, what, 20 years to get to be independent?
So, I mean, I'm 48 now, so that's 30 years ago.
Me too. Wow, that's pretty good. And actually then, if you started when you were 18, you started when Bratislava was like a brand new destination, because that was right when the Berlin Wall came down and it became its own country, right?
Yeah, that was a few years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, or as we call it over here, the Velvet Revolution. That was it was in '89, and that was in the early '90s, basically, when a lot of things were changing, and honestly, Bratislava wasn't a place you would have wanted to visit at that time.
I did.
It was a drab, gray industrial city. I mean, the old town was still there, but it was kind of a dead, and there wasn't much life. So they didn't take care of the town for 40 years, and it was falling apart. But
that's what I remember about it. I was there in 1994, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was really a big thing when the Irish pub opened in '96. It was like the first place to go to. And after that, it really exploded, especially then after we have joined the EU in 2004. So it's been booming ever since. In fact, in the last 10, 15 years, this has been one of the most dynamically developing capitals in Europe.
Wow, that's fantastic. So is tourism sort of the main business, or what else do you guys do?
No, not at all. Bratislava isn't, despite all its charms and everything, tourism doesn't play a really big role in the city's economy. Although the GDP is generated by 70% services, 30% industry, but it's mainly about IT. Bratislava is a big IT hub for Europe. IBM, Dell, whatever, they have thousands of people here, and banking, insurance, and so on, all kinds of services. But still, the industry is important because Slovakia is, and not many people know this, although many of them drive our cars, but they don't know they're made here. In fact, so Slovakia is the biggest car manufacturer in the world per capita. It's a small country of 5 million, but it produces a huge number of cars, and some of the best in the world. If you know fancy SUVs that the Americans love to drive, like Porsche Cayenne, Audi Q7, Audi Q8, VW Touareg, Land Rover, Discovery, Defender, and Volvos, and whatever. Some of the fanciest cars in serial production in the world come from Slovakia exclusively. They're only made here, also for the US market.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no
So
idea.
that's the biggest industry in the country, but and partly in Bratislava. But as I said, IT is much more important than in Bratislava. And tourism is, unfortunately, I have to say this, I've been working on this for, a few decades, but it's still the same thing, that Bratislava is still completely underestimated, as if people were reading guidebooks from 30 years ago. They haven't really noticed how much it's changed and what a beautiful place it's become. People tend to spend days in Vienna, Prague, Budapest, and then they think they come for a couple of hours to Bratislava. And by the time they arrive, they realize what a mistake they had done, because they wish they could stay longer, but they can't anymore because the itinerary is all booked, right?
Well, we're going to change that, Martin.
This is a city for, 2-3 days, not 2-3 hours. So people are often frustrated that they only have a couple of hours because they'd love to stay longer.
All right. Well, you have a slideshow prepared, so you can convince us. So let's get it out there. Let's get the word out that Bratislava is worth staying a few days. So go ahead and you can share screen if you want.
Yep. All right. Yep. Can you see it?
Yep, we sure can.
Good. Yeah, I always use the term surprising because people just don't know what to expect, and I'm always surprised they don't know what to expect, because why should Bratislava be in any way different than Vienna, Budapest, Prague, that actually surround us? And given we were one country for such a long time with all of our neighbors, and it was always a very important historic city. So it has a little bit of everything. I'll show you in a map. It's located in between, which means it's got a little bit of Prague, of Vienna, and of Budapest. We are kind of a blend of everything. So, and this is something, what you're looking at, this is something that people notice as the first thing, no matter how you arrive to the city, even by plane, or by ship, or on an interstate from Vienna or elsewhere. This is the first thing that comes up, the castle, which is just so dominant. It's the main landmark. It's up on a hill above the city and above the river, occupying this very strategic position. And for thousands of years, peoples have used the castle hill as a retreat. It was fortified, it's been inhabited for continuously for over 3,000 years. So what is special about Bratislava, to single out something which is unique in the world, is that is in a tri-point between 3 countries. So virtually from this castle, from the old town, it's 5 minutes by car to Austria and 10 minutes to Hungary. The city was traditionally trilingual. All these 3 languages, German, Hungarian, Slovak, were spoken there. So that's what makes Bratislava so special. compared to the other cities. It was always very big blend, basically a melting pot, and it's got a bit of everything, as I said. And it's a very green city. When you look left in the picture, left of the castle, you see mountains that are actually within the city with thick forests. And on the other side, to the right, where you see the Danube River, there are huge fluvial forests, beautifully preserved. So it's actually the greenest capital in the EU. You 10, 15 minutes away from wilderness, basically any direction from the old town. And Vienna and Bratislava are very close. It's only 55 kilometers. So whatever, 35 miles from Vienna. It's nothing. And so this is what I've been talking about. This is the map of Central Europe. And I stress Central Europe because geographically and culturally, we always wear Central Europe as opposed to Eastern Europe, which is geographically elsewhere, and culturally also it's quite different. You see here in the map, you see up here in the north, that's Prague. You see Vienna next to Bratislava. You see Budapest down here. To the west, you see Salzburg, Munich. South, you see the Adriatic, you see Venice here, and so on. So it's actually one of the biggest advantages, and that's what we explain to expats also who move to Bratislava, is its location. It's you're very close to basically everything important. So that big country I was talking about that we were part of for many, many hundreds of years was called the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or the Habsburg Empire. And you see what this part of Europe looked like before World War I, or the end of World War I. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was in fact Europe's largest country. If we don't count Russia, it was larger than France. So within that was the red boundaries. And you see Bratislava was pretty much in the heart of that big country. And honestly, Bratislava is actually a pretty new name for the city. It's been called Bratislava only for the last 100 years. Before 1919, for 1,000 years, it had been called Pressburg in German. And even today, most Austrians and Germans and Swiss will call it Pressburg, okay? And Pressburg was one of the, not the first tier of cities in the empire, like Vienna, Budapest, and Prague by size, but it was still the second tier of some of the most important cities in the historic cities in this part of Europe, in the old empire. So you see an engraving here from the 1700s. Basically, if I showed you the view today, it wouldn't look much different. It would be larger, but I mean, the old town is still there. All the buildings are there, and the castle is there too. And this is what it looks like today. So in this picture, you've got all the four main landmarks of the city. You've got the Danube River in the foreground. You've got what we call the UFO bridge in the foreground. That's quite something, with a very fancy restaurant in that UFO, which is called actually the UFO restaurant. You see the castle, you see the cathedral, and you see the TV tower here on top of the hill. So the old town is right to the right. And all the landmarks have pretty much the same height. Now you see here, this is was taken from a drone hovering above the old town. So you see the structure of the old town, terracotta tiles or copper roofs. It's not maybe it's not a city that will just, you'll be stunned by some big boulevards and huge buildings and so on. It's more a quaint city with more narrow streets and smaller squares. It's very cozy, actually. As I said, it's been inhabited for a very long time. Different peoples were changing here. But what's important in our history is that within the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as the name suggests, it was two parts, Austria and Hungary. and Hungary used to be an independent kingdom before the Habsburgs took it over in the 1500s. And when they took it over, they made Pressburg here the capital of Hungary. As Budapest, what is now Budapest, had been conquered by the Ottomans, the Turks, as the capital. So everything moved to the second largest city, which was Pressburg over here. And for 300 years, this would be the capital. This would be the royal capital. And the castle was the royal residence. The cathedral was served as the coronation church of the Habsburgs. So in 300 years, they crowned 19 Habsburgs there. So we have our share of the royal history. But in the 19th century, they decided to move the capital back to Budapest. So Budapest, since it had been conquered, reconquered so many times in these wars against the Turks, there was nothing left of it. So it's a pretty new city from the 19th century mainly, whereas this city here was never conquered by anyone in history, was never bombed, it was never destroyed, and it's been beautifully preserved. The only difference is that in the early 19th century, they decided to move the capital back to Budapest after 300 years. And while Budapest was booming, this was actually stagnating. So it kind of froze in time in the early 1800s. And therefore, you don't see those big boulevards here and the big buildings that you see in Vienna and Budapest. Everything is a little smaller here because it's so much older and also so much more diverse in architecture. There's 700 years of architectural styles there. So in our new history, modern history, in 1918, when the Austro-Hungarian Empire ceased to exist after the lost World War I, a number of countries came into existence, new countries, and one of them was Czechoslovakia. So that's when the Czechs and the Slovaks, good friends and neighbors in the old empire, decided, well, it's maybe better to stay together in a smaller form. So that what Czechoslovakia was about these two peoples deciding to stay together, the Czechs and the Slovaks. And then in 1983, we had our velvet divorce, as we call it. So Czechoslovakia in 93 ceased to exist 30 years ago in a very friendly and very civilized split up, and super fast within 3 months. And I don't think there's any other two countries in Europe with such great relations, despite the split up, as the Czechs and the Slovaks. Of course, except for playing hockey, which is sport number one in both countries. So today it's a city of some 650,000. So it's about 1/3 of Vienna or of Budapest or 1/2 of Prague in size. Now the castle, as I said, occupies this very prominent hill above the town. And the paradox is it was never conquered by anyone, and still it was destroyed, because Napoleon in the early 1800s wasn't able to take it twice. And when he was gone, there was still the army occupying defending the castle or station there, and they had nothing to do. And it was Italians. They threw a big party. They got drunk. And they were smoking in the stables in the hay, and they set it on fire by accident, and the whole thing burned down. So nobody ever managed to destroy the castle except drunken Italians.
Hey now.
So for 150 years, it was a ruin. In fact, the only thing remaining were the outer walls of the big building. Everything else was gone. And they did some reconstruction in the 60s, but not much. And only in the last 15 years, it's been completely reconstructed into what it was like in the 1700s, when it was the royal residence. Because in 2007, by chance, the historians found in Vienna in the archives the historic plans from the 1700s, detailed plans. And the government said, well, now that we know what it looked like, let's spend an awful lot of money to rebuild it. So that's what's happened very recently. They just opened it just before the pandemic. And this is a very nice global view of the Old Town and the main square. The main square is where the famous Christmas markets take place also, but in the summer also other markets and concerts and so on. So the entire Old Town is actually pedestrianized, and it's like one single restaurant. So it's one terrace next to the other virtually. And it's a university city. There are 100,000 university students there. So you come at midnight and you will have difficulties finding a seat out there on the terraces. It's just so lively in the evenings. It's some say it's the northernmost Mediterranean city in Europe. It has a very Mediterranean ambience. So in the summer you feel like you're in Italy or Spain. So this is what it looks like in the summer evening. In the evenings, we're in the streets and squares. There are concerts. It's a very musical place. Many famous composers like Beethoven, Mozart, Liszt, Bartók, Haydn, whoever, they all either started their careers here, or they worked here, or they were born in the area. So there's a great musical heritage. And you probably know that a lot of classical music actually comes from this part of Europe. And Bratislava is in the heart of that area. So not surprisingly, people love classical music and love to go to opera and philharmonic. Honestly, I don't know another place this size, this city this size, that will have 2 opera houses. And we managed to fill both thanks to the Viennese. 1/3 of the guests in the opera here are from Vienna usually, because it's just so close. You know, you take a train and you're here in 40 minutes. But what fascinates our guests most is not only the Old Town itself, those cozy squares and narrow streets, but it's especially something that in many other Central European towns you don't really find. You probably find it, you rather find it in somewhere in Spain or in Italy, and that's the courtyards. There were many Italian architects active here in the 1500s, and they created these beautiful courtyards. And in the summer, the locals, when it's hot, they prefer to sit in the courtyards. There are gates, one end, the other end, so you can actually go through often. But in the courtyards have their own microclimate. It's much cooler in the courtyards. It's shady than in the streets, and you find more cafes, restaurants in the courtyards. And also they're great for concerts because they have great acoustics. So, and that's got to do with our winemaking tradition. Bratislava lived, or Pressburg lived, for 700 years from winemaking. And the wine was made right in the courtyards of these houses. So historically it's a wine region at the same time, and that what makes Bratislava also rather special in European terms is that we have an equally strong wine tradition as well as beer tradition, but we'll unfortunately never beat the Czechs in beer drinking. They are the best in the world because we also have to drink a lot of wine, and you can't be best in everything. But for all the beer drinkers out there, the Czech Republic and Slovakia are the only 2 countries in the world where beer is considerably cheaper than water.
Wow.
Seriously, you order a soft drink, or you order mineral water, you get a small bottle. You you pay whatever price, X. You order a large beer, which is a half a liter, a pint, and you're going to pay the same price, although you get double the amount, the volume, right? So that's the reason why we drink so much beer also, because it's cheaper than water.
It only makes sense.
Yeah. So this is what the streets of the Old Town look like. in the evening, great ambience. Well, having to do with wine and also beer. There are many wine festivals and food festivals. So just look at this beautiful square there with all the barrels there. And yeah, everywhere you meet people tasting wine or beer or any food. And yeah, there are a number of big palaces in the city, and this is actually one of them. It's the Presidential Palace. So this is our White House. And when you look top right corner, you see a brown area there just below the woods. Now that's vineyards. You see the plot of vineyards there up there? That's where the vineyard starts, right in the city, right in the heart of the city, actually. No other capital city in the world has more vineyards within its limits than Bratislava. There are some 2,000 acres of vineyards within the city limits. So the wine country basically starts right in the city, and it stretches some 40 miles out of the city. So we'll come to talk about that in a moment. What's been happening in the last few years is that Bratislava has rediscovered the embankment and Danube. And there's been an incredible amount of construction along the river, beautiful riverbank developments with promenades, cafes, restaurants. So that's changed the city a lot. And still, most of the visitors, you know, although it's very close to the old town, they kind of stick to the old town, but they miss a lot by not really walking along the river. And it's this is where all the locals love to go out, so along the river, where in the summer you have fresh breeze and plenty of places to go out. This is the second castle in Bratislava. We have two. It's a castle ruin, a very romantic place above the Danube River, which was blown up by Napoleon. So he didn't manage to blow up the other castle, but he managed to blow up this castle. And this was actually for 40 years when we had the communists in power until 89. This was the place where the West met the East. And right below the Castle Rock, where you see those little roads there, those were patrol roads of the army, because this is where the Iron Curtain was, that infamous Iron Curtain with mines, electric fences, barbed wires, big patrol towers with machine guns, searchlights. So this is a very historic spot where there were a lot of people killed trying to get across the river to Austria, because you see a confluence of two rivers here. The one in the foreground, that's a smaller river flowing into the Danube in the background. And the border is in the middle of the smaller river in the foreground, and in the background, that's the other bank also is Austria. So Austria is just across the river. We also have other great history, 20th century history from the 30s, when Czechoslovakia, as the only democratic country here around and a close ally of Britain and France, tried to protect itself against a German invasion. So the city has a preserved system of great bunkers and fortresses. They were actually never used. They were built in the 30s against a possible German invasion, but they were never used. And they're now a museum. So for the fans of World War II history, this is also fascinating. And it's a city full of art also. There's a lot of art right on the river. And notably this famous Danubiana Museum, which is on a thin peninsula right in the river. Yeah, vineyards, I mentioned. That's the spot I showed you in the picture of the Presidential Palace up there on the slopes. So this is from the other side, from the other spot down looking at the city and the castle, so that you see those vineyards in the foreground. And talking about wine, this was the first place in the world to produce champagne outside of France. in 1825. And even today, Slovakia produces some very fine sparkling wines. The reason you've never heard of Slovakian wines is that the volume of production these days is not as much as it used to be 100 years ago. And in other words, we drink it ourselves and there's nothing left to export. So anyone who wants to drink these fantastic wines needs to come here. And this is what the countryside looks like right outside the city, you know, 20-30 minute drive right outside the city. You have a lush green countryside full of vineyards and beautiful castles, look at, and the little winemaking towns. Okay, so that's a really a fairy tale country, which is within a short drive of the city. A lot of castles, a lot of wine, chateau, and a lot of arts also. Not only historic, there are also some very contemporary looking wineries with more art, as you can see here in the top picture. That's Marilyn Monroe by Andy Warhol. Some may have noticed Marilyn Monroe by Andy Warhol was the most valuable piece of art of the 20th century. And Andy Warhol was Slovak by origin. And so these guys who own this great winery actually collect his works. And they own the largest private collection of Andy Warhol works in Europe. So it's partly in the winery. So that's all. That's Bratislava in a nutshell.
Wow.
So you understand now that I'm frustrated when people come for 2-3 hours. It's impossible that you can see this, of course, in 2-3 hours, right?
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I've been there twice, once in the 90s and once in the early 2000s, and it wasn't that cool. I mean, I think that it's development.
No other city in this part of Europe changed so much in the last years as Bratislava.
Wow, that's really impressive. So people spending time there, what are kind of the top things you would recommend if you had, 2 or 3 things to recommend above all? It sounds like going to have a beer in one of those courtyards for sure, but what else would you recommend as top sites?
Well, look, the old town is, of course, the highlight. And if you have a little more than 2 hours, then the walk up to the castle is definitely worth it, because the views from the castle overlooking the city and the countryside, when the weather's right, you can see all the way to Vienna from the castle. So those views are stunning, and it's definitely worth the climb. I mean, the castle itself also, but already the view from up there is stunning. So that's the two highlights, of course.
And because you want to attract people to actually stay in Bratislava, if they're coming to stay, are there lots of good kind of little boutique hotels and B&B?
Oh, plenty of. In fact, that we have a lot of that. We don't really have the big brands. They haven't, like. Don't look for a I don't know, Le Méridien, whatever. We don't have those. Okay. Well, we have some, of course, big modern hotels, luxurious hotels, of course, too. But it's mostly about historic boutique hotels. That's
really cool. I mean, that's my favorite kind of accommodation, actually.
Yeah. So if you want to stay in a 15th century building hotel, that's Bratislava is the place to go.
Wow, that's fantastic. And Reed, you've been to Bratislava a few times, I think, yeah?
Yeah. The thing that I came away from is that old town is quite whimsical. And I don't want to give too much away because it's kind of a fun part of the discovery there, but they've done a really good job. Martin was talking about how important art is there, not only old art, but new art. And there's a handful of bronze statues in town, and they're not stuffy generals on horses. They're very cleverly placed, cleverly themed statues that attract an awful lot of selfie action. That's all I'm gonna say, right? There's some fun things, and then the pubs are so charming and welcoming, and not just the statues. And then people have mannequins hanging out the windows, and there's a whimsy to Bratislava that I think gives it its fun feel that and makes it unique, right? I mean, you know, we just saw Linz has a beautiful old town, and Vienna has a beautiful its historic center, and you know, there's a lot of narrow winding streets and beautiful courtyards, but then there's this added level of whimsy, and that was my takeaway the first time I was there. I just enjoyed that so much.
Well, I think
You
it's
know,
also
a lot of Hollywood movies are made here on location in Bratislava, because a lot of the things that are actually in the movie in Vienna are made in Bratislava, because especially historic movies, because Bratislava, they say, looks like Vienna 200 years ago. I mean, the buildings are lower and more historic and so on. So there's a lot of action in the old town sometimes, yeah.
well, I was going to say that's unique, isn't it? I mean, you know, as you mentioned, it's really neat that it wasn't bombed, or I mean, especially for a city in Eastern Europe like that to retain its original character prior to the 19th century, because that's when so many cities in Europe changed.
Yeah, there was a huge boom all across Europe in the, like from 1850s, 60s onwards, when all of these ring roads and the big boulevards were built. So we actually and they raised down a lot of historic quarters. Actually, like half of Paris was raised down in the 1850s to create all those boulevards. But we missed out on that development, so it's been preserved, you know, as it was until the early 1800s. Unfortunately, in none of these movies we get any credit. So we always contribute to the fame of Vienna or whatever. We never get any credit for that. So Vienna gets ever more famous, and nobody knows anything about Bratislava.
Well, we're just going to let everybody in on that secret. But, you know, it's good to have secrets. It's good because you don't want to spoil it too much, right?
Oh, actually,
Jewel.
Yeah, I'm sometimes, I'm not sure if I should make too much marketing for Bratislava, because it's exactly the fact that people like about Bratislava, that it's not overrun. They love the ambience there without having to go like this.
This is always the challenge. I mean, as travel journalists, this is always the challenge. You know, when we find something that we think is amazing, you want to tell everybody, but you know, by telling everybody, everybody's going to know about it.
Yeah. So I always ask my guests after a tour, well, did you like it? What did you like it? And so on. And they say, okay, so if you liked it, okay, spread the word, but only to people you trust.
Only cool people allowed, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that was a fantastic presentation, Martin. What an absolutely beautiful little trip through Bratislava. And I hope everybody who's watching this is inspired to come and seek out Bratislava. But also, if you would like, you can seek out Martin personally, because he is a local guide there. And I did put that into the comments. But if you could just tell us again the name of your website, where we can find you.
Well, my name is Martin Sloboda. So that's my website, basically, martinsloboda.com.
Okay. And are you on any social kind of stuff, Facebook or Instagram?
Instagram, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Very good. And Reed, when the Danube cruise goes here, what is it that we do in Bratislava?
In the morning we have a walking tour, and when we're lucky, we get Martin. But of course, he's a busy man these days, and if it's not Martin, though, he sends one of his, you know, personally trained guides, and I got to tell you, they are exceptional, right? We've never been felt like we got short shrift there, but fingers crossed that Martin will be available when you get there this next year. A little walking tour of the center that introduces you to all those squares and the courtyards and the whimsy and some of the architecture and whatnot. And then you have, I don't think we've got a full day there. I think we leave sometime after lunch, but there's always a couple of hours of time for personal exploration, time enough to get up to the castle if you want to, time enough to go up in the UFO restaurant if you want that. So walking tour and free time, which is pretty standard fare on the cruise for most of the stops.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to coming to Bratislava, not on a cruise also, so that I can explore it a little bit more. So This has been really fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your effort, Martin. What a beautiful slideshow. And thank you again, Reed, for coordinating this double header today of Danube information. So we're going to try and hit Salzburg, I guess, maybe later this week or next week. But anything else you got for us on Danube, Reed?
I think we've covered it all. Yeah, if we can get a session on Salzburg, we've hit all the major stops, and yeah, that's all we've got going.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. Just to let you know, there will be some travel programming next week. I will be coming to you live from a very surprise destination. I'll be doing something you wouldn't expect me to do next week. My parents are involved. So you're going to want to show up at Adventures with Sarah every day starting on Sunday, and you'll get to see what it is that I'm doing. There's going to be packing stuff, but it's a whole different ball of wax. It's a surprise, and we'll see you on Sunday for that. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. And thank you so much again, Martin, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure. See you in Bratislava.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.